really different. Also, you can put the, the old 3 in the morning, you can't home drunk for the club, and they've got the color bars on the TV, nothing on. When you run that signal through each the color dot 2 little squares, the purple ones, you should be getting a hit into each of those. That's what the screen does. So you can put one of those in your game and sort of calibrate your game to itself and come up with a baseline. And it seems like it's a bit wanky, but it's actually important. Because the hardware's so crazily different. Check this out. So the Xbox and the PS3 are very different. PS3s are hot, so whenever you see game comparisons between this version of the game and Xbox, and the PS3 and PS4, it's a little bit more washed out, right? It's because the gamma's higher. The 360 actually puts out below broadcast standard 0 nits, like it puts out a 0 signal. And it's the only piece of hardware that does, so I don't know where else. Which gives you contrasty blacks, but it means you've got dissimilarity between the two platforms. So you can deal with your hardware gamma, which I talked about earlier. And get a monitor calibrator. It's like Spider 2, I think they're like $300. Tune your art directors one, tune your review ones. Use it, because what's your baseline? Like if you're not actually running on a monitor display at 0, how do you even know what your colors are? So just back to this again, look at the differences in color. Just be aware of that stuff. So character lighting. We're using a hybrid character lighting scheme, which is, I guess, interesting in the sense that none of the components are actually that complicated, but the magic is sort of in the way that they're all combined. It's sort of a multi-layer system. So we do our ambient through a spherical harmonics. It's a radiance is around all the time. Sigraph data 2001. And we use that for our complex ambient. So instead of a constant ambient, it's a sort of harmonics ambient. So we've got 9 factors of ambient lighting coming in, and that's world relative. And then your diffuse field light is dynamic, like the moon or street lights or whatever. So that's world relative too. Combine that, layer that. Secondary specular light, so little lights in the environment contribute. That goes over top. So those are world relative. This is where it gets interesting. Rim lighting, obviously, is camera relative. And a core shadow or key light, this is the twist, the fancy one. And what a core shadow light does is it's a subtractive light, and you put on a vector to the character, and you use it to suck light out of the room. And that's obviously camera relative too. So world relative light is cool, and camera relative lighting is kind of cool, sort of weird, because if you rotate around, it'll stay the same. But the magic is in a hybrid, sort of crashing those two things together. So the core shadow is that little bit of darkness that sort of separates between the diffuse and the rim light. And if you're doing an outdoor or bright daylight game, you might want to think about doing something like that to get your characters to pop a little bit, to get them to stand out. So it actually sucks a little bit of the light away that your circle harmonics sort of put in there that you don't want at a certain angle. We learned this from a guy named Jim Fiskus, who's a pretty famous photographer. He actually has these black velvet panels, and when he shoots people, he'll put them up sort of on an angle just outside the frame, and they act just like a sponge, and they suck the light out, so you can kind of sculpt that core shadow. It works great with some key. We're actually going to flip it, because our game, the pony game we're working on is, we might make that a key light. So here's circle harmonics. Basically, it's a way to take complex 360-degree HDR environment lighting, and you boil it down to like a cheap mathematical function. We're using 9 layers, so it's just a little bit more than that. So here's on the left is like a simulation of 2 layers. Like a 1 layer is big and it's just flat constantly. And as you add the factors, you get more sort of complex lighting. So if there's a red wall beside you, you get a little bit of red spill. We find that 9 is a good balance between performance and look. You can go up super high. There's people that do like 200. It's beautiful, but it's expensive. And look at that. That's circle harmonics lighting. That's great. Look how well it fits it in. The problem is it's too good, and it'll actually sit your character into the scene. You can't pop them. You can't see anything. Which is why we have the camera relative core shadow rim lighting. Pop them out so you can set them in the environment and pull them out just like a film. So harmonics are pretty cool. They're cheap. This is Paul Debetic, he's the guy that's sort of pioneered all HDR stuff. Here's his pros. They're a great place to start. But what you want to do is we shoot your own. So when we were in New York, we took a 3-inch chrome bearing, custom sky size that's what it was. X-ray is just like black on the thing. And it's from a logging machinery or something. It's a perfect sphere. So we shoot this and we create our own. And then you the camera, you can adjust your bracket or exposure, create an HDR image, land, you've got perfect environment. Too perfect, really to stabilize it. So here's just sort of like an intensity versus normal representation of character lighting. So you got your rims, they're hot on the edges. You get your diffuse, which maybe in the middle, your harmonics, you get your SH there, it gives you like a nice base layer. But you take that coarse shadow and you can use it to kind of scoop a little bit out on an angle. It really makes your guys kind of pop. An illustration, and you see comics, they'll put like that black line just between the ring weight and the fill weight. So that's what that does. So here's a little trick. I'm going to tell you how you can make perfect specular maps. Absolutely perfect. Specular maps are hard to paint. Any character artists in here know it's like challenging. How do you make perfect ones? Well, here's what I have. This is a fancy name, specular extraction from differential cross polarization. You can do this for $50 in a digital camera. I'll show you how. So you basically get a surface's true specular. So here's light, it vibrates in all directions, and a polarizer filters it out, so you just get light vibrating on a single axis. Okay, cool. How do I do that? Well, here's a $50 polarizer filter to get a camera shot. So what you do is you take a guy, and you sit him in, you put your camera on a tripod, and you have him point at the sun. And the angles are a little bit critical. And you take a photo of him, and then you rotate your polarizer degree 90 degrees. You take another one, and you notice the difference between those two photos. Well, you put them into Photoshop, and you align them, and you do a difference, and you've got a perfect specular. And what you've done is you've extracted the specular, solely the specular from the image. There, my friends, is a perfect specular. Don't paint them, make them. It doesn't also work for characters, it works for environments. This isn't a good example, because it's not hard in an environment, like it's you're doing with the sun. Hey, sun, move over there. You can't really do it. But what I want to show you is just for proof. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's a cigarette butt up there. And if you see here, it's like totally dark. Like cigarette butts aren't, they don't have any specular. Even the metal is totally specular. It's showing through, so it just shows you're capturing the specular. So if we go back to our audio imaging here, you can do it with 8, that's just 12. Rotate the subject, don't move the camera. See the camera straight, the sun's going to stay still, and you just need to rotate the subject. You got to tell them to stay still between the two shots. It's a little bit of work. You need a tripod, no question. And it takes a little messing around to get the angle right. But you're probably going to rip that much valid information because of the size, it sort of falls away. But you have them spin around 12 times, and you do that, and don't paint them, make them. It's a really great way. So here's the next tip. Roughness makes eccentricity maps. So a lot of people don't use them. Very few people use them. I think they're great. They're one of the only ways that you can actually truly control the specular on a surface. So what's an eccentricity map? So what you do is you make a texture, and you assign your values, your blacks to be a narrow specularity, and your whites to be a wide specularity. And this isn't a spec map. Spec maps just give you power. This gives you size. So you can remap your black texture, a pixel, and your white to be, like a narrow eccentricity or wide. That's just 0.4. You can play around with it. So if you think of that as a pixel on the surface, your eccentricity defines the radius or the width of the specularity per pixel. And your spec map is just giving you power and color. So how do you make something that's like matte but dim, or shiny but hot? You can't do that with just a specular map. You actually need both of these textures. So the spec map just tells you the brightness when the spec is visible. The eccentricity determines when the specular gets visible per pixel. It's kind of into your head on, so this explains it. Incoming light ray gets perturbed, bounces off. So that's a shiny thing, a wet pool ball or something. You get a pretty hot specular. And then you get this one coming in, and it goes more. It's like a tennis ball, it's softer, it's a higher value. Well, using an eccentricity map, you can do this per pixel. So, and this is old, but we were doing something 360. This is just some quartz. What I want you to get from this is we've got matte and bright and shiny and dim, and we've got control over both. So by using the eccentricity map, you've actually got complete specular control. This is a huge one. DXT compression really loves it. Yay. But it's actually not that great in some regards. It's a 565 compression method, so you get an extra bit for your greens, because humans are green sensitive. We can argue about it, it's not because we evolved in the forest. But your blues and your reds get ripped off a bit. And what that means is when you make textures that histograms look like this, you're actually wasting a whole bunch of information. So what happens, people come from like PS2 and they go to PS3 and they want to make something dark, so they put a dark texture on it. And your histogram looks like this. And then DXT compresses the crap out of that, so it just gives you like a few colors. and you're